have Ryder Windham, writer of many of the junior Star Wars novels, especially the ones that came out at the time of, Galaxy of Fear, Glove of Darth Vader, and so on. Not those ones, but, Star Wars missions and so on. As well as a lot of the guidebooks, such as the blueprints and the upcoming Star Wars Ultimate Guide. So without further ado, Ryder, why don't you introduce yourself to those who may not know who you are?
My name's Ryder Windham. I write Star Wars books, and I got started working on Star Wars back in around 1992 or 93. I worked at Dark Horse Comics from 1992 to 1995 as an editor, and I was assigned to work on Indiana Jones comics, and subsequently was given the assignment to develop a new series about droids, the adventures of 3PO and R2-D2. And it was because of working on the droids project, my co-editor was Dan Thorsland. And I mean, in brief, we wound up developing stories or storylines that were submitted to Lucasfilm. We had trouble finding available writers who would give Lucasfilm what they wanted. Lucasfilm wanted just very charming, fun stories that could be read by children and enjoyed by families. And a number of the writers that even Lucasfilm encouraged us. They said, "Oh, why don't you try to get this writer?" Well, we tried, and that writer said, "Oh, I'd like to really take the droids in a very dark direction." It's like, well, that's not what Lucasfilm wants. So it was mostly just because of circumstances and timing. Dan Thorsland and I wound up scripting droids, and it wasn't out of any great ambition to become a writer. It was more just desperation to try to get the job done at the time. And some degree of confidence of thinking, yeah, we could do this. So, anyway, I left Dark Horse Comics on good terms in 1995, and subsequently a friend at Lucasfilm, Alan Couch, who was the editor of books, and he contacted me and said, "We have a lot of upcoming projects coming up. We need writers." And he began recommending me to editors of Lucasfilm's publishing licensees. So when people ask, how did you become a writer, my short answer is timing and nepotism. I mean, it was just, it was not out of any great desire to write. It was just through connections. And next thing I knew, I was writing a lot of books.
So you started in the generation of, I believe it's John Whitman's Galaxy of Fear books, Hollis and Paul David's Glove of Darth Vader, those books. That's the generation of Star Wars writers that you started up with, as far as like the junior novels and stuff?
It's funny, I think, I'm not even sure that those were out when I was started at Dark Horse. I mean, those books I think came around the same time. They were in that period of the mid 1990s. And when I started at Dark Horse, the only comics that the Star Wars comics that were out at that point were Dark Empire by Tom Veitch and Cam Kennedy. And Droids was the first Star Wars comic other than Dark Empire that was produced by Dark Horse. So it was very early on in the new campaign of Star Wars publishing.
So you said that you weren't intending to write and so on. What was your goal when you signed up with Dark Horse and so on? What did you want to do professionally back then?
It's my career was very meandering. I have a bachelor's degree in graphic design and illustration. I worked as a graphic designer for a few years in Providence, Rhode Island at Brown University. And I was doing work as a freelance cartoonist. And it's funny just in how graphic design and illustration, I had a childhood interest in comics that over time developed into a more mature perspective on them. I applied for a job at Fantagraphics Books in Seattle, Washington, and for an editorial position, and I was surprised I got the job. And it's that led to a job offer from Dark Horse Comics, and I mean, it's it was a very meandering route. I mean, I never thought, oh, I would love to have a career in comics. It was just really just, I guess, I was aimless. I was on a rudderless course, and that I guess I was following the advice of one of my professors, a design professor, and who said, yeah, well, everyone's students are always so concerned about what jobs they should take. And he said, any job you take, give it at least a year, and you can put it on your resume, and you'll gain that experience. But, if you, if for whatever reasons you think like, okay, I've done this and maybe I want to move on, then you should move on. And in my case, at Dark Horse Comics, it had everything to do with my then fiance, now my wife. She had moved to New York City, and I moved to be with her. So the timing there, though, that was funny because I mentioned earlier Alan Couch at Lucasfilm. He was recommending me to different publishing licensees, and when he contacted me and said we need writers for Star Wars books, it was just a few weeks later I got a call from an editor at Scholastic who pretty much on the spot offered me, I forget whether it was a 4-book deal. I know it led to about 8 or 12 books almost right off the bat. But that, I mean, at the time, the Scholastic editor said, "Oh, we really like the fact that you live in New York City because if we need to meet, we can meet with you, and if we, and also when you with manuscripts, you can take advantage of our bike courier service." Now, Jeremiah, keep in mind this was 1996, and like I asked the editor at Scholastic, I said, "Well, do you have email?" And he said, "We have inter-office email, but we're not set up yet for receiving manuscripts by online." So that
by 96?
This was 1996, and
wow, they're behind the times a
no,
little bit.
not by much, because I mean it was really only around 1994, 1995 that it was, I mean, I think AOL was really, really big in 1990.
Yeah, and then with Windows 95, I think is when Outlook started.
Okay.
Something around there. But yeah, I guess that's 95, so this is only a year later. So I guess, I guess it's not as strange as
it wasn't. It wasn't, and also at the time, I think publishers were also, they were trying to figure out, okay, is this effective? Is this legal? Is this a problem if we're sending documents over? I don't know the rationale or at the time, but the first few manuscripts that I wrote, I had to print them out myself, and a bike courier would pick up the manuscript along with a floppy disk that held everything. So it sounds all very dark ages, but that. At the time, I mean, it was just, it was fortunate that I was in New York at a time when, that it seemed like, oh yeah, we'll get Ryder to do it. He's in town. So, but that changed very soon. I mean, within just, several months, I was sending scripts in electronically, and so yeah, so anyway, I guess it was about 2 years later, I was filling out an income tax form and it said occupation, and I realized, I think I put down freelance artist before because I wasn't sure what to put down. And at some point I realized, I guess I'm a writer because that's what people are paying me to do. So, yeah, it's it's rough when people ask like, how do I do what you do? Is I have no idea. I didn't study journalism. I took English classes in college, and anytime I had an opportunity to take an elective, I took English classes because I enjoyed them. But I never thought, oh, I might be a writer someday. That was never a goal.
So did you find it challenging to go from being an artist or a comic editor and or writer to writing junior novels?
No, and I mean, the thing, at some point I did realize too, I can write faster than I can draw. It's the difference between laboring over a drawing for a day or two or knocking out 3,000 words in a day where, I mean, it just seems like there's a different process to it. But I mean, all of those, I mean, whether it's drawing or writing or editing, it's about problem solving. It's about trying to figure out, okay, what is the goal of this assignment? Who will be reading it? What's the audience? What will they, not just what will they understand, what are their expectations for this? And so, I mean, I think I tend to approach almost any assignment just more like it's an equation. It's a problem that has to be solved.
So you started off, as far as writing goes, outside of the comics, you wrote a lot of the junior novelizations for, would that be for DK back then, or was it Scholastic?
That was for Scholastic. Scholastic hired me to write. The Star Wars mission books. Those were my first assignments with Scholastic, and that was my first prose fiction work ever. And it pains me to read it. I learned as I went. I mean, I reread my stuff, and I just think, oh goodness, I could have written that better. But with the novelizations, that assignment came up around 2003 because I remember it was 2004 that Lucasfilm was planning on releasing the Star Wars trilogy on DVD for the first time. I'll even backtrack, which is that when my editor at Scholastic contacted me and said, would you be interested and available to write these new junior novelizations of the Star Wars trilogy? I said, well, yeah, but why? I mean, why do you want these done? What's the market? And I was told bluntly, it's like, well, we're looking to exploit the release of the DVDs. And I thought, oh, that makes sense, because I just thought, I guess it was just because of the timing, there was so much focus in 2003 on, still the focus was on the prequel. So it just seemed out there for me at the time it's like, why the novelizations? I guess a good point there too to mention is that nearly all of my work has been done by way of assignments. There's a misconception that I sit around thinking up Star Wars books and then I send them to an editor or a publisher and they think, great idea, Ryder. Yeah, let's do that. And it never, that's happened maybe 3 times that I can think of. I mean, most of the projects are strictly assignments. So yeah, I worked on the Star Wars novelizations, and then subsequently I wrote novelizations for Raiders of the Lost Ark and also Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So I think that's it for me in novelizations. They were fun to do.
I know outside of that, I know recently you've done a lot of Clone Wars stuff. Recently you've done Rebels stuff, the mission books. I don't know if I'd call them tie-in novels. I'm not sure what to call those ones, but they work with Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, I would call them spin-offs, or you could call them tie-ins or spin-offs. But the Star Wars Secret Missions series for Grosset and Dunlap, that was a rare case of it began as my idea. I met Rob Valois was the editor for the Clone Wars books at Grosset and Dunlap, and I met him. Oh goodness, I can't remember. I know it was at a convention, and I think it was at the San Diego Comic-Con, maybe in 2000. Oh gosh, it might have been 2007 or 2008, and I asked him kind of bluntly. I said, are you planning on doing any original fiction? And he said, do you have any ideas? I'd like to do something original. So I pitched Clone Wars. I mean, it was just I I can't remember. I mean, it was kind of an odd development. We just talked. I mean, we both agreed that the story should involve a young Jedi, and it grew from there. But as far as making up the characters and the situations, Lucasfilm had input on various things. Like, for example, I think it was in book 2 of the Clone Wars Secret Missions that an editor at Lucasfilm really wanted to see Bosk inside, it featured in the story somehow. And I asked, is this because Bosk will be appearing in an upcoming episode? Not because I'm trying to spoil anything, just so I'm aware of it. And yeah, that was the reason. So, but then with the recent book for Star Wars Rebels, that was an assignment that came to me. I think it was last November that I was asked by Lucasfilm to work on Star Wars, a junior novel featuring Ezra Bridger, and it was a prequel story before he meets the other characters. So that I was given very limited reference. I mean, I was given information about, okay, he's a 14-year-old thief. He's a loner. He lives on this planet that's occupied by the Empire, and he hasn't met these other characters yet, so he shouldn't be getting too close to anyone. And it's funny, just a few weeks before I got the assignment, I'd met Alan Harris, who played Bosk in The Empire Strikes Back, and I just thought I enjoyed his company. He's a great guy, really funny storyteller. And I guess at the time, Bosk was just sort of on my mind, and I thought, I've got to get a hook on this story because some way to engage the reader. Because I just thought if it's about a 14-year-old loner thief, there's not really much in the way of conversation there. And as soon as I thought maybe Bosk would be a good bridge, that he would serve as sort of a bridge from Clone Wars episodes, as well as, for The Empire Strikes Back, and everyone at Lucasfilm liked the idea, so that's how Bosk figured into that book. Wow, did I ever ramble that answer, didn't I?
No, that was a great answer. That was fantastic. We loved the story.
Okay.
So, you've also been well known for doing, or aiding with reference books, starting in 98 with the Pocket Guide for Characters in Star Wars Trilogy, and recently they've announced, the Ultimate Star Wars, which you and quite a few other writers are putting together. How did you first get involved in reference books?
That's a good question. I think that my involvement was at first was just that I used them, and Lucasfilm knows that I use them. That if I'm working, when I would get an assignment, I would try to figure out how to make this consistent with previously published books. And so even when I was working on Star Wars Missions books, I was using West End Games role-playing books for reference. And I'm not sure. I think that the first assignment that I got for a reference book, it may have been Star Wars Who's Who. Or there was actually it was Star Wars Who's Who, followed by Episode 1 Who's Who was the title. And then I did, there was the Episode 1 scrapbook as well. So, I mean, I guess it's funny because, nobody asked me, oh, can you also do nonfiction, or can you, can you do some samples of this? I mean, I would get these assignments and think, again, it gets down to problem solving. I've never done this before, but I think I can do it. But the Episode 1 Who's Who was, and I still think of it that way because at the time, when I wrote it, The Phantom Menace, it hadn't even been named that. I think even on the cover, its title is Star Wars Episode 1 Who's Who. Anyway, Alan Couch was the editor at Lucasfilm who was working on the book at the time, and Alan, I asked, he said that, oh yeah, this book will require you to write about various characters in episode 1, and he gave me a bunch of headshots of various characters, and that most of them had names, and that's about all I had for the pod racers characters, the aliens, the pod racer pilots, and also for members of the Jedi Council, with the exception of Mace Windu and Ki-Adi-Mundi, and Yoda. There was just no biographic information at all about those characters. And so I asked, well, what do you have on these guys? And Alan said, well, why don't you make stuff up? Which at the time I just thought, well, yeah, I guess I could do that. But that was not my, that was not something that I thought, oh, goody, I get to make up all these things. I was really thinking, well, gee, what a responsibility, because whatever I make up, other writers may have to work with whatever I make up. And so what was, I don't know, it was weirdly rewarding on some level. Years later, I was watching it was the DVD version of The Phantom Menace, and it has the bonus features on it with the extended pod race sequence. And I saw there was just some reference to, and I forget the pod racer pilot's name, but there's a reference to him being, I think, a Volpterine. And I almost fell out of my chair because I thought, I made up that word. I mean, this was not something that was done during production. This was that whoever was putting together the DVD, they thought, hey, what's this guy? Oh, well, according to this book, he's a Volpterine. So it was like, it was just a word that I made up. And the same thing happened with, I was watching the Clone Wars, and the season that reintroduced Darth Maul, and there was a conversation. I think it's Obi-Wan who says something like, he's asked, isn't he a Zabrak? And when I heard it again, I fell out of my chair. I made up the word Zabrak, for Zabrak, I made that word up for the species for Eth Koth, and another writer. And I don't know who it was. Someone else thought, well, gee, Eth Koth, he has horns on his head, and Ryder says he's a Zabrak. So for some reason, because at the time, Lucasfilm endorsed the idea that Darth Maul had, quote, Sith tattoos, unquote. In other words, the facts got changed over the years. But in any event, someone decided that, that Darth Maul was a Zabrak, and it was a word I made up. It has nothing. There's no history behind it beyond that. So anyway, but with the reference books, I've done a bunch of books about the Millennium Falcon and Darth Vader as well. I mean, just sort of, it requires research. It requires, even though that the so-called facts are fictional, it does require looking through those books. So I enjoy doing the research books, but I guess, if you really if I had to choose, I prefer doing juvenile fiction. I just think it's I like the pace of it. I like writing stories, but I'm a total hack. Anyone who has something that needs writing and there's a paycheck attached to it, I'll do it. I say that with tongue in cheek, but only slightly tongue in cheek. So.
You have to pay the bill somehow.
That's right, exactly. I don't get paid to read them unless it's research involved. So anyway.
So one of our listeners wants to know if one reason why they keep on going to you for reference books and so on is because of your experience as being a comic editor with Dark Horse. So you know how to do layouts, know how to work images and captions and stuff in.
It's funny. It depends on the editor or the publisher. I know that Haynes Manuals, I've done, I mean, in work that I've done with them and with the artists Chris Wright, Chris Trevis, I know that they appreciate that. I mean, when I look at something, if I can visualize it, sometimes I'll do a quick sketch. But also, I mean, if in the course of working with artists and doing layouts, if I see something and I think this looks wrong, somehow this looked like my eye hit this line and it should for continuity reasons or chronological order. I think it would be better if we shifted this over here. So I can articulate why something might be, how things might be improved. And to be honest, I think some editors might even avoid me because of that, because they think, oh, he's a control freak. And it's like, no, it's like there are some projects that I work on where, I write them and I'm never asked for any input about the design, and that's fine. I mean, but if someone wants, if someone asks me, like, whoa, what do you think about the layout of this? If I see something wrong, yeah, I'll talk about it. So it's funny. I don't think, maybe some people come to me because of my design experience, but I think it's mostly because they know that I'm respectful of the reference material and that I do my best to do a good job and also to meet deadlines and maintain consistency and be entertaining. So, but yeah, it's funny that no one has ever said to me, "Oh, we really appreciate the fact that you used to be a graphic designer a long time ago." But yeah, but I actually, addressing the listener's question, I would say that my graphic design experience has definitely helped me in my career as a comic book editor, as a writer, just as far as being able to, objectively know the difference between, will somebody understand this when they see it and or if they read it? And, is this text redundant to this image or does it complement the image? So, it's a wonder I get any work done. I'm so analytical.
So, oh, hi, Bruce. Sorry, my son decided to lick my leg. So this question, I'm going to try to shorten it down a little bit. This person says, you've done a lot of mix of junior novels and reference books. He would like to know if your reference book, Jedi vs. Sith, Essential Guide to the Force, was a nice mix of both worlds for you. So it's just a lot of original stories, or at least passages in there about from different people, as well as the reference side, as well as having to reference comics which you love, especially the early comics which you started working with, and current Lucasfilm projects.
That book was a weird challenge from the start in that the editor at Del Rey contacted me and said, if memory serves, because I remember this as a conversation over the phone. We set up a time to talk. He said, wanted me to do a new essential guide and said, yeah, we've got this idea and it's called the Star Wars Jedi versus Sith, the Essential Guide to the Force. And I said, how is that supposed to be different from the Essential Guide to Characters and the Essential Chronology, in that both those essential guides, also published by Del Rey, featured information about Sith characters and Jedi characters and their various battles? And the editor replied, I don't know. Do you have any ideas? And I laughed and I said, you mean you just have a title? And that was pretty much it. They started off with a title for a new essential guide. And I said, I need to think about this for a few days. And it took me, if memory serves, I think we talked on a Thursday or a Friday at first. And it was over the weekend, mulling it over. because I thought, we are essentially going to be, presenting information that has been covered in other books before. So I thought the best thing that we could do would be to present it in a new way. And I thought first person narratives would be, it would be a very different from the other essential guides. And I thought it would be an interesting opportunity for writing, just because of, writing from the first person, from various character perspectives. So I think I may have included some writing sample for it, and the editor liked the idea, and I said, I'm not supposed to know this. And you'll have to check. I can't remember just when I was working on that book or when it was released, but that at the time I'd found out that that an upcoming Del Rey novel was going to kill off a character. And even now, after, all's been said about canon versus legends and whatnot, I don't like to name spoilers, but that I learned a major, I'd heard through a mutual, a friend, another writer, that a character was going to be killed off in an upcoming Star Wars novel. So when in talking with the Del Rey editor, I confided. I said, "Look, I have learned that this character is going to be killed off." And the editor said, "What? How did you find out?" I said, "That's not you. You should be just happy that I'm very good at secrets." I'm not. I won't name names, but I said I think that what my only question is, what's the publication date for the Essential Guide to the Force? Because if it comes out after that novel, I think it would be an opportunity to maybe play off of the death of that character. That could be kind of sort of a focal point of sorts for the book. So again, this is one of those dopey things where, the book came to me by way of an assignment, but I had to do some problem solving. And I also was thinking not only as an editor, but I was thinking almost from a marketing perspective too, of, how could this book somehow play off of the Star Wars novels that Del Rey was publishing at the time. If you were to ask me what was the most fun I had writing that book, I'd say writing Count Dooku's dialogue was way up there. As I was writing, I'm not that full of myself to think, I'm really good at writing Count Dooku dialogue, but it was fun. Or his monologue, I should say. Just writing. As I wrote it, I couldn't help hearing Christopher Lee's voice in my head, and that didn't happen with everything that I wrote, but that it was Count Dooku. There's just this kind of there's definitely this condescending, very superior tone in his voice, and I just thought, yeah, I can do that somehow. Not drawing from my own experience, mind you. It was an interesting character, an interesting opportunity.
So another listener question about that book. Were you to draw on anything from BioWare's Knights of the Old Republic games and the information they wrote for that? Because a lot of the force powers listed seem to come from that.
I'd have to dig up some really old annotated manuscripts to verify that. But I know that I used various game books and oh goodness, that there were, some of the material, and then, this is sort of getting back to, oh gosh, this is a struggle to remember, but here's what I do remember is that if you read Dark Empire, and if you read the various Jedi Academy books and whatnot, that part of the problem with those books is that you've got Luke Skywalker claiming that he's discovered a bunch of ancient books or texts or holocrons about the Jedi Order, and that he's rebuilding the Jedi Order based on these things. And so when I got the assignment for the Essential Guide to the Force, I know that I think episodes 1 and episodes 2 had already been released, and that that there were a lot of discrepancies. I think I sort of chose on some level where I thought, okay, would Luke Skywalker, if I'm trying to maintain continuity, it seems like he's aware of certain things, but it's like if Luke Skywalker knew about the ancient Jedi, how would that affect things or his decision? And forgive me, I am rambling. I'm trying to remember. Did I use what did I? How far back did I go? But I know that I did use game books and whatnot for and role playing source books for reference. But it's a lot of fans were sort of I remember grumbling over sort of the differences of how does this mesh? How does Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy mesh with what goes on in the prequels? And the fact is, they don't really mesh. I mean, the novels were written before George Lucas, shared the story for the Phantom Menace and revealed details about the Jedi that nobody else knew about. So, as much as everyone, many readers would like to think that, just because everything is approved by Lucasfilm before it's published, it doesn't, subsequently things do change. And, it's less of a well-organized chronology than a constantly growing, expanding thing. So, I suppose maybe now that, now that Lucasfilm has their own story group, I suppose that things may mesh better in years to come, but I expect there will still be sort of, variations here and there where someone will say, wait a minute, this comic doesn't mesh with what happened in this movie. It's like, well, that's because the movie came out several years after that comic came out and things change. So, well, you really got me in a rambling mood.
No, that's fine. I like the rambling. Okay. So we're going to begin wrapping it up shortly, but there's one more book which I know I have a bunch of listeners that really want to hear about, and that's your, I believe it's called The Bounty Hunter Guide or The Bounty Hunter Code.
Yes.
From Boba Fett. So that book came out kind of like how we have the Book of Sith and Jedi Path and the most recent one, the Imperial one. How were you presented with the idea for that book, and how did that book evolve from, I'm assuming, the idea that Del Rey or DK gave you?
Actually, it started with Becker and May. They're a book packager in Washington State, and they had previously worked on the oh goodness, this is terrible. I'm forgetting the titles. Is it the Jedi Path, the Jedi, and there's a book of the Sith. So this was their third book, which would be produced with a case. Like a sort of kind of a special effects oriented thing. And I was brought into that book, a project. I think Dan Wallace came in. He was the first hired, and I was brought in. It's funny. It was over some. I'm trying to remember what expertise did I have. I think it had to do with Boba Fett. That there was something I'd worked on that. I can't remember what it was. But it was a project that I'd worked on. An editor at Becker and Mayer thought, oh, maybe we should consult Ryder. And I think it was because maybe it might have been my work not only on Boba Fett, but also with Bosk and Kratisk, because I'd written about them in the Star Wars missions and what were the sort of the Star Wars adventures books, the role-playing books that were published by Scholastic, the books that tied in with episodes 1 and episodes 2. So when I saw the assignment, I thought one of the challenges was just to think, okay, what can we expand on, what can we build on, and it's funny. I think my most significant contributions to the project were the suggestion of making the package for the book. I said, how about a Mandalorian ammo box? And everyone liked it. It's like, what is that? I said, I don't know. It sounds really cool. And the other thing was the memoir by Kradisk, which Kradisk is Bosk's father and the head of the Bounty Hunters Guild. And again, just based on my previous work with those characters, I thought, this was something I could do. I mean, I worked on other aspects of the book, writing about, oh goodness, I can't remember now. I mean, just different aspects about the Bounty Hunters Guild and rules and regulations. A lot of that material was culled from role-playing books and from novels. So that's how that came. I mean, that book came about. I had nothing to do with the selection of artists or the even, I think I may have made suggestions for illustrations, but even that, I can't recall. It's a lovely book. It was fun. It's a fun package. I got a kick out of it when I pressed the button and the thing hissed open. I think I may have written text for the Wanted poster that went with, it was a very collaborative effort. So that in the end, the only thing that I remember very specifically was that, I wrote the whole book about Kradisk's memoirs, and it was my idea to do a Mandalorian ammo box, but that's about it.
One last question for me before we do the wrap-up questions. This many years later from when you first started, are you still allowed to just make up stuff if you don't know it?
Whenever I make up stuff, I always footnote it. My manuscripts are riddled with footnotes. I mean, I shouldn't say littered. They're riddled. They're riddled with footnotes. And that if I make something up, there's usually a reason for it. So that I never thought, I'm going to make something up just because it's an opportunity to make something up. I mean, because I know that what the Star Wars fans, I believe what they really more appreciate is trying to draw from previously published sources or from, to incorporate details to make them realize, okay, Ryder is writing in the Star Wars galaxy. He's not writing a science fiction story and trying to force Star Wars on us. So, as an example of making things up, in the Star Wars Rebels, Ezra's Gamble, the juvenile novel. I made up some names of sort of various bit part characters, location names. But that, in doing it, but the reason again was not like, I get to, expand the universe. It was more like, I need to call this place something. I need to give the reader, a name for this thing. I need, instead of just referring to this character as an alien, I should, maybe give the character a proper name for conversation. So yeah, I do make stuff up, but that, when I do, it's not just some sort of, I don't jump at the opportunity to make stuff up. I always first wonder, is there something that I can use here to make the reader feel like this is they're immersed in the Star Wars galaxy. And as an example of that, I'd even say, when I got the assignment for writing the Star Wars Rebels book, I mentioned earlier how I came up with the idea of incorporating Bossk into the story. Is it possible that another writer might have thought, oh, this would be a great opportunity to create an entirely new bounty hunter and introduce that character in this story? It's possible, and it's also possible, I suppose, that Lucasfilm Story Group might have said, yeah, that sounds good. When I made the suggestion of Bossk, I mean, I also said at the time, I said, you could recycle an image of Bossk from the Clone Wars, and you could use that on the cover, because I think a picture of Bossk and Ezra Bridger on the cover of the book would probably intrigue more readers than if it were just a picture of Ezra Bridger. But by using Bossk, it wasn't just like a sentimental reason. I just thought, yeah, this would help convey to readers that this is a Star Wars story, not that it's just, it doesn't just have the Star Wars logo on it.
Fantastic. So, most Star Wars fans, especially fans of your work, know that you're working on Ultimate Star Wars with Dan Wallace. Mm-hmm. But we're going to give you the soapbox now, as we do with all our guests, to promote anything you'd like to promote at this time. It could be, some people promote appearances, some guests just wanted to rant about fans. Some people promote upcoming projects, charities. We're going to give you the soapbox to promote whatever you are up to right now, be it writing, be it whatever you want to promote.
Well, thanks. I'm very involved with the local Star Wars costumer groups in my area. There's the 501st Legion New England Garrison, and also the Rebel Legion Alderaan base. And I've been doing events with them for about 5 years now, and for the past 4 years, we've done a bunch of blood drives together, and we have one coming up on Saturday, December 27th, and it'll be at the Providence Public Library in downtown Providence. And the purpose of these blood drives is not just to help the blood centers collect blood, but it's they are extremely family-friendly events. It's more like a Star Wars party where there happens to be a blood drive going on. And the goal there is to inspire children to grow up to become blood donors too, and to make them realize that their parents and guardians are heroes because they are they're lifesavers. I mean, every donation, every pint of blood can save up to 3 lives. So it's really, I appreciate that so many friends and fans turn out for these events. And I've been giving blood since I was in high school, and it's funny just how things clicked, that when I realized that the 501st New England Garrison had done a blood drive in Providence I think it was about 5 years ago, and I read about that, and I thought, I have to figure out how this works. And so anyway, I mean, I've worked with other Star Wars costuming groups to do blood drives, and it's this past summer I helped coordinate the first ever international blood drive with Star Wars fans. We had, I believe it was 25 countries participated, over 40 blood drives in different locations. I don't know how much, how much did we collectively collect for blood units? I don't know. I mean, but it was an amazing experience just to, I think, I love the costumers, especially the ones who will do these charity events, who just jump at the opportunity for a good cause. And so anyway, on December 27th, I'll also add that it's a very challenging time of the year for blood centers to collect blood drives, that it's not unusual throughout all over the world where you'll hear blood centers are they're in desperate need of blood during the holiday reasons. One, most people are having fun with their families, and two, people are getting hurt while having fun with their families, and they need blood. So that it's like that. So not enough people give blood during the holiday season. So wherever you are on December 27th, I hope that you might consider giving blood on December, during the holiday season, whenever you can.
Thank you. That's fantastic. So the 27th, and this will be out on Saturday, so you have plenty of warning for people to go out there and donate blood.
Yes, I hope.
I do plasma, so I don't donate blood as much, but the plasma pays me money, and I help people. So
that's good.
Helps cover the bills sometimes.
Right.
So thank you so much, Ryder, for this awesome interview, and don't worry about rambling. I love the rambling. I love the stories. That's sort of usually where we get your best stuff, because sometimes people are so succinct with what they say, or so practiced that they don't really share very much interview to interview. But others, the ones they just like to talk, you get the stories that the fans love to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for sharing those.
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I get, I occasionally will do these interviews online where, it's just, by interviews via email. And I think, okay, I can give a succinct answer to that. But when it's sometimes I have to kind of figure, I guess it gets back to problem solving. How do I answer that question? So, okay.
Yeah, and thank you so much. This has been an honor, and I hope we get to see lots of great stuff from you in the future. Be it Star Wars, be it maybe Indiana Jones, be it other novels or other stories or comics or art.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It was fun talking with you.